Please welcome to the stage CEO and founder, Decagon, Jesse Sang, and partner, Accel, Sarah Idelson.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. As was mentioned, I'm Sarah Idelson. I'm a partner at Accel, the venture capital firm. And I'm joined by Jesse from Decagon. And we're here to talk about the real playbook for scaling an AI startup. We're going to try and unpack some of the how of what has been sort of a tremendous journey to watch the Decagon team go on recently. So, Jesse, why don't we start by having you do a bit of an introduction about your journey?
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Jesse, one of the founders of Decagon. And for those that aren't familiar with us, what we do is we're building an AI customer service agent. So we primarily work with large companies that have a lot of users, and these users will have questions and issues and things they need to do. And in the past, you'd have to go to a human customer support agent and wait on hold and get them to help you and so on. And so the AI agents that we're building are essentially there to have a conversation with them, give them a great experience. It can be over a phone call or live chat or whatever, really. And as Sarah mentioned, we partnered with Accel at our Series A. We've been scaling very quickly. And today's discussion will be mostly about our learnings from that and so on.
And maybe I'll just mention to a partner at Accel on our early venture team. As Jesse said, we invested at the Series A. I've been at Accel for 3 years. Prior to that, I spent a decade operating in different startups and had the privilege of being a part of the hyper-growth phases of a few different companies, Uber Eats, and then most recently, Fair, the B2B wholesale marketplace. But I'd say this current moment and the scaling that's possible within these AI companies is unparalleled to even those hyper-growth moments of before. And so excited to talk about it today. And I think, our headline that we submitted for the event was 0 to 7 figures. And I think we already are at 0 to 8. And so maybe I'll just open it up, Jesse, if there's any sort of general commentary that you want to offer about that trajectory, or we can just dive into sort of the how.
Sure. Yeah. So we started the company late 2023. This was after GPT-4 came out. I think, like many people, we were very interested in what sort of things the models could do, and you could build agents, and it was very early days at that point. I think we did a whole process of finding the right market to build in, and I think that was very helpful because the rate of your growth, I think, in my opinion, is mostly determined by which market you're in. And so we figured out, hey, customer service is going to be probably the big first use case for AI agents. I think in hindsight, that's roughly turned out to be true. And there's just so many large companies out there that are willing to kind of invest in this because they can see the ROI and they can make a very credible argument of why they should invest in AI. Growth was really fast in the first year. We essentially went from 0 to 8 figures in ARR. And it's mostly on the back of, like I said before, right? People can see the ROI, and so it's easier to justify them partnering with us and kind of spending because they know that, hey, if we spend $250K, we can point to $800K in savings because the AI agent's able to do all these things that we had to pay humans for before.
Cool. So, you touched on sort of studying the market, choosing a good market. I think one of the key things we've observed is just the degree to which you know your customer. And maybe, this is sort of a platitude in company building, is that you should really deeply understand your customer. But I think, what does that mean in practice? What did you do at the founding of the company? What are you continuing to do as you build to stay close and build that deep customer understanding?
Yeah, at the beginning, you don't have any customers, right? So you're basically just talking to potential customers, and the goal with those conversations is to figure out what they actually get value from. And there's not really a great way to do that consistently. You just have to build a lot of intuition in these conversations. So, for example, you could be talking with the wrong person and they're feeding you stuff that's not really that useful, and you waste time building it. Or you talk to someone and they're super excited about this sort of product you're pitching, but you get to the end of it and it's they're not actually willing to pay that much for it, and so they were excited about it, but there's not really much there. So a lot of the knowing your customer piece is to have these conversations and be really aggressive about what they actually care about and what they're willing to pay for and what they will actually get value from. And so I think we did that process pretty aggressively for this company, and that's how I mentioned before how we decided on this market. But our view is that you have to go through that process. Otherwise, you're just guessing at what people actually want.
And maybe give people a sense of sort of order of magnitude. How many customers were you talking to before you started building? What's the rate at which you're, obviously now you do have customers you can go and get feedback from, but yeah, order of magnitude, what were those conversations before you started actually like writing code?
Yeah, order of magnitude maybe like 100. So it was course over a month. We tried to pack every day as much as possible with customer conversations. We would have a good conversation, and then we would kind of get some sort of commitment from them that like, hey, if we built this, like how much is this worth to you type situation, and then like, we'd have all these conversations during the day, and then at night we'd kind of crank out the product and show it to them the next day. And the first thing you do is it's unlikely that's going to be like the final thing, and so you have to have a very open mind about iterating and trying new things. And eventually, once we had talked to enough people, I think we just felt enough signal of people pushing us towards this direction. And that's how you build conviction in what to work on. And then
a lot of what you're describing there is that early founder-led sales motion, which I know is a big part of the journey. But sort of how has that changed now as you're building a much bigger business, but how are you staying close to that customer feedback and customer understanding?
Yeah, we spend a lot of time with our customers. Like pretty much every customer we have, we tend to generally work with only larger customers, but everyone we have, we spend a lot of time with them, like weekly touch points at least. And that allows us to be super close to what they need and what sort of things are missing. And if someone feels like something is missing, they might not just proactively tell you. And so you do have to be proactive about getting them to share what they're thinking and what sort of things could be the next on the horizon for the product. So that's what we do now. And then obviously we're still a pretty young company. We're still doing a lot of go-to-market and sales and so on. And so I'm very involved in that, and a lot of our team is involved in that, not even just the salespeople, and that helps us stay pretty in tune with the customers and the potential customers and so on.
And this wasn't the first company you'd founded, so were there any lessons learned from prior experiences, or maybe in your community of founders, are there traps that you see folks falling into in this bucket?
Yeah, so before this, I started a different company. It was eventually acquired by Niantic, and then that company was a consumer company, so very different. But probably the biggest learning was along the lines of the discovery process, where for that company, we just did too much of the sitting by ourselves and thinking about what would be a good idea, and then building that and doing that over and over again. And it was quite tough because we were grinding pretty hard, and eventually we just launched a bunch of things that had no traction whatsoever. And that's when people tend to burn out more. And so I think the biggest learning for us was to not do that and instead just spend a lot of time with our customers beforehand.
Okay, the next big kind of pillar that you've been super thoughtful around is team building. When you and I first met, actually, I think I was first sitting with your co-founder because you were closing employee number 5, and it was amazing to see sort of your focus on talent and hiring, especially at those early days, but it's continued and been, I think, a really important source of sort of differentiation. So how do you think about getting the right people on the team?
Yeah, I think the team is more or less a reflection of what the founders care about. And so whatever my co-founder and I thought were important, I think that's reflected in our team currently. We're very proud of the team we built. It's obviously a mix of sales, go-to-market, engineers, PMs, deployment folks, and so on. And everyone has different preferences. I would say for us, we knew we wanted an in-person environment. So even today, we're essentially 100% in person. We really cared about having people that were very just intelligent and could adapt easily to things, right? So I think that kind of selects for a certain profile at the early stage where you're working with both engineers and salespeople and people to be very comfortable in this environment where there's not that much structure and there's not that many rules to follow, and you can't just sit down and someone gives you a to-do list and stuff like that. So, yeah, I don't think there's one right way to build a team. It's just the founders have to really be clear about what things they care about and what things they're not willing to move on. And then once you're able to find enough people, that kind of becomes the culture of the company, and then it just continues from there.
And then that's sort of the team as a reflection of the founders. Maybe do you want to talk about sort of finding your co-founder and what was important in that process and how you guys came together?
Yeah, finding a co-founder I think is just very luck-based. It's the same thing as finding any other, like a good friend or a partner or whoever. My co-founder and I, we happen to be in the same stages of life, so we both started a company before that was acquired. I think we officially met through A16Z, who led our seed, and they backed my last company as well. And so it was kind of happenstance. We had a lot of mutual friends. And I think the most important thing for co-founders is you have to be in like a similar mind space. Like your skill sets can be different, but like the level of commitment, the working style, the type of company you want to build, I think if those are pretty aligned, then it's just a lot easier. And yeah, I think like co-founder team, it's so variable because everyone is different, right? And like every candidate you meet is also going to be different. So you have to just be open-minded and like, be open to new things, and eventually like you'll find someone that I think is a great fit.
And would you have advice for anyone who's in that sort of co-founder dating stage? I feel like I talk to a lot of founders or sort of pre-founders who are in that exploration. Like, what are the dimensions that are maybe okay to compromise on, and which are the ones that you think you should absolutely hold out, even if it means delaying starting your company as much as you may want to right now? What would you advise?
So if you're looking for a co-founder, the easiest thing to do is just to experiment and like build something together. I think that'll give both people or the whole group like a really good sense of what it would be like. I think this is kind of unique to co-founders because if people are considering co-founding, they probably do have the time to invest in this. If you're just hiring someone, maybe they have a full-time job and there's not really much time for you to get like a trial in, so to speak. But for co-founding, you can definitely get a trial in. That'll be the best signal by far. I think the biggest thing you can't move on or negotiate on is just the level of commitment like people have to being a founder. And I think you'd be surprised, but I think there's a pretty wide range of that. And if one person is more committed than the other, then it's just not going to work no matter what. So that's the first one. And then probably the second one is just like working style. Like, are people working at roughly the same pace? Are people kind of like putting the same amount of time? Are people kind of gearing for the same types of goals, right? Like some people want to build companies because, their approach is what I mentioned before, which is like it's very customer first, and you're just kind of doing discovery. You're not tied to a certain specific idea. Other people might be more tied to specific technologies or specific types of companies that they want to build. And so I think if those things are aligned, you're generally good. And after that, it's just more of a personality thing, and that sort of thing you can really figure out in a trial.
And then when it comes to the broader team, we'll talk in a second about execution, but I think you have a very high execution, high intensity culture that you've built to achieve these results. How do you screen for that in the hiring process? You speaking about commitment and sort of the co-founder, but in all your employees, I think that cascades through. How are you screening people to bring the right level of, sort of rigor to the job that you guys expect?
Yeah, I mean, it's something you can pay attention to when you're interviewing someone and you get some signals, but it's more or less you just ask them about their past experiences, right? Like, tell me about a project where you just invested the most time in your life in, and you see what they say. You can kind of get a sense for, the favorite projects that they've done in the past, like, how hard were they working? What sort of pace did they have? And then you can also get back channel references, right? And so if that's something you're optimizing for, it doesn't really matter really what you're optimizing for. You're only going to get so much from the interview, but you can kind of see examples of their past work. You can see examples of, like past relationships they've had, and then, ask them. So, yeah, I don't think it's like anything too different than interviewing for other things.
Do you do any active like counter sell?
For us, not really. I think by the time I think the final interview happens and like I'm talking to them and so on, I feel like we've already screened for all these things. Like people have already opted in to being in office every day. People have opted in to being part of the culture we have, and that's great. And so my job is mostly to talk about the past experience, like see if it's a good fit for our team, see if their personality is a good fit, and so on.
Well, let's get into that sort of execution culture and how you've built that. How have you set up the team to sort of execute at the pace that you have?
Well, in the early days, it's easier because everyone's in one room and you know everyone. And you're just like talking all the time, right? If you're in the same office. I think nowadays we're really just trying to make sure that everyone has North Stars that are aligned in the same direction. And so if you're talking about sales or engineering, like people have to know what they're working towards and like what the important goals are. And if they're not working towards one of the important goals, then it's probably not that important. And then it's very measurable, right? Like for us, we are a SaaS company, like I'm sure many folks here, and the main thing you're measured on is ARR and how many customers you have and like what's the quality of those customers and so on. So these are very measurable metrics, and so that kind of becomes North Star that everyone's marching towards. And we have ambitious goals, and so that kind of naturally drives some sort of intensity and ambition with the team. And then along the way, there's a lot of checkpoints, right? It's like if a customer gives us really good feedback, we treat that, it's like we celebrate the wins, we share that with the team. If a customer goes live, if we close a deal, if a customer renews for 2 years or whatever, right? Those are all wins, and we celebrate all of them. And so people across the team know that what they're working towards are these high-level goals. And yeah, I think that so far has driven the intensity and the execution. But again, we're still early. I think there's still a lot of things for us to figure out. And one of the things we are going to hopefully figure out is like, how do we keep this execution culture as we grow? Because right now we're about 100 people and we're growing quite quickly. And at some point it becomes harder to maintain the culture just by like saying stuff. And so you need to have systems in place and so on.
And what are you observing as those behavior, that sort of accountability culture, that cadence? How is that playing out in practice, and what is sort of an unexpectedly like rapid turnover in software, right? Like your market, as you mentioned at the top, like you researched it, you were sort of correct in identifying that customer support might be one of the first largest to be upended by AI. That has meant that people are sort of going into purchase decisions maybe out of schedule that they were originally planning to. Maybe they're having to do POCs or proof points differently. Like, what are you seeing in terms of the SaaS go-to-market that has maybe evolved in this sort of AI moment?
I think the biggest difference with AI agents is that you should be able to really test and see the ROI. And so in our case, right, it should be very clear. If you were deploying AI agents for someone, they should be saving money, first of all, because the AI agent should be able to resolve a good portion of their conversations, and that's a very quantifiable metric. The second one is customer satisfaction, or customers actually happier interacting with this AI agent instead of waiting for a human. And if both of those are going up, then it's like a very, very easy business case for them, because it's like, hey, we're saving a boatload of money and people are happier, which means we're going to generate more revenue in the future and people are going to be retained longer and so on. And then we kind of break down that math for them, and that's how you're able to kind of drive sales faster. And I would say that is a pretty necessary component of any AI solution nowadays, is because people have come to expect that, and because AI is just so easily like testable. People are expecting very hard ROI. So I think the two qualities of our space that have been very helpful for accelerating has been, number one, there's the ROI factor, right? It's really easy to measure what you're gaining from it. And then two, it's easy to deploy. Like, you don't have to do it all at once. If you kind of pick one surface area and deploy to 10% of the customer base, you can already start getting feedback, and like you can be live in production. And if that goes well, then you get ramped up, and it's very easy to justify, right? So it's easy to get started, and it's easy to measure. And that's how you get these buying cycles to be shorter, and it's kind of, as Sarah mentioned, to happen more frequently, because you're not waiting for like these big projects to take place and make sure everything's perfect and like test it 1,000 times before they'll even entertain some sort of commercial discussion.
And then I think a source of conversation is just how quickly everything is changing and evolving and advancing. And so how have you structured yourselves to stay sort of at the tip of the spear of what is possible in the technology and getting that as quickly into production and sort of expanding the surface area of what Decagon can do for folks?
It's relatively easy, I would say, right now, because we're still a pretty agile team, and customer service is one of those industries where it's so large. Like, there's so much surface area for us to climb. But in terms of on the engineering side, I think we've always taken the approach that, like, hey, we should be building while planning for stuff to be changing underneath, right? So the models are changing, they're getting better, the new models are good at different things, and so you have to be able to evaluate them and figure out which models are good at what. There's new techniques coming out all the time as well that people are figuring out, and so you have to be building in a way that is conducive to that. And if a new model comes out, you should be able to like instantly evaluate it and then swap it in and out and have minimal sort of leverage or lift there to get that done. So that's one big piece. And the other piece is when you're kind of thinking about building, we own the application layer. And so the application layer is kind of like the final product that the end customer is buying. And that helps a lot with this because what we're tasked to do is we're just solving the business problem, right? And that's not going to change no matter how the technologies are changing. So as the technology evolves, the business problems still stay the same. And that's what's powerful about building the application is because you're kind of being priced and you're kind of being evaluated by solving the business problem. And if the technology improves, then that should help you. This is not necessarily the case if you're more in the middle, right? If you're kind of an infrastructure thing, then maybe you have to think more about, okay, what happens if the models change? What happens if the applications change? So in general, we're trying to build in a very flexible way such that as the technology improves, that should improve our product too.
And then maybe switching gears to sort of mind share and sort of breaking through the noise in this category. We've talked a little bit about sort of sales process, engineering culture around staying, at the edge on AI. How, from sort of a product marketing, positioning, getting the word out about Decagon, there's so much talk about different AI solutions and a lot of pressure tops down for folks to sort of have their AI narrative. How are you breaking through all that noise to be in consideration, to gain preference?
Yeah, I mean, I think at least right now we're a lot more well known than when we first started, of course, and so the sort of messages that we're generally pushing are, number one, Decagon is kind of unique in that we're Gen AI native, and we're kind of seen as the sort of more modern solution to a lot of this automation that's happened in the space, because our space has had a very long history of automation, and so the natural question for a lot of our buyers is, okay, well, how are you different, right? Like those people are using Gen AI now too, right? So I think we've really pushed this concept of like, hey, we built from the ground up, and because of that, you're able to do so much more with the Gen AI models. The whole paradigm that you build these agents is going to be different, and so that's been helpful. And then I think the other piece on the product marketing side is that like we have a sort of solution that actually works, right? That we have so many case studies now with big customers like Hertz or Chime or these customers that are seeing a lot of impact, and they've done case studies with us where, hey, we saved this much money, or we were able to repurpose this much of our support team, or we were able to drive higher NPS and higher retention and so on. And so when we do our product marketing, a big message is like, hey, AI is really hyped up right now. There's a lot of use cases, but this is one where there's actually real ROI, and you have businesses out there that are actually seeing like fundamentally sort of powerful impact. And so that's what we emphasize when we do product marketing.
And then, with the trajectory you've had, how do you think about goal setting, raising the bar, keeping that ambition high? I think there's a healthy level of sort of dissatisfaction, despite I think that, some folks might be patting themselves on the back, and that is not at all the attitude on your team. And so how have you built that into the culture? How do you think about driving ambitious goals from here?
I think everyone on the team knows that we're still early. Like the market is so large, we've only touched like a fraction of it, and so there's still so much to do. And I don't think anyone feels like we've like achieved the goal yet. So I don't think that's hard at our stage. I think the other part of it is just keeping people focused on like what could be, right? Like we've gotten a lot of customers now. We have a lot of things figured out that we didn't have a year ago. But we still have so many things to figure out because like the goal is the final goal is so far in the future, right? We want to be working with the biggest companies out there. We want to be kind of deployed across the entire surface areas. We want to be handling the entirety of their customer interactions. And so there's still always so much more to do.
Awesome. So we've touched on knowing your customer, building the team, creating a culture of execution. Any sort of other, main messages you'd share for folks that sort of want to go on are on a similar journey in the audience?
No, I just think picking the market is very important. I assume most folks here are involved in SaaS, and I think the nice part about SaaS is that it is a very structured way to build a company, and that's helpful because you can measure revenue. You have like concrete customers that you can talk to, and so on, right? And I mentioned before, my last company was a consumer company, and the benefit of the consumer is you can grow a lot faster, but it's just like way less structure, way higher variance, and You don't have like single customers who are paying you a lot of money that you can talk to. So I think within SaaS, being able to find a market that's like a good market and has the properties that I've been talking about, I think it will just make everyone's life a lot easier. So yeah, that's the last thing I would say.
I think we have a minute for questions, and there is a microphone right here, and they will keep me honest. But if there are questions from the audience, if anyone wants to pop up to this microphone, we can take them. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Hi. You said about talk to customers, but how do you do it in the daily basis? I mean, you have some venture capital or someone else that can connect you straight to Rippling or Notion, all those kind of people. How do you did this network to talk to someone who you're gonna use your solution?
Yeah, you definitely want to find the companies that are most known for working with startups, right? Like Rippling is definitely one of them. And then you just figure out some way in, right? So like maybe your friend knows someone, or your VC knows someone, or maybe it's like 2 hops. But like if you just do it enough, I think you'll be able to find someone there, and then maybe that person's not the right person, or maybe they don't have a use case, but like their coworker does, and so on, right? So it's just kind of like you have to find the shortest path in, and then you just try to do that again and again. So when we were first starting, we were just aggressively lining up conversations with literally anyone that would talk to us, and yeah, that's just what you have to do.
Good to know.
Great. If there's one more, otherwise, we appreciate your time, and hopefully this was helpful. Oh yeah, there's the music. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.